And welcome, everybody. Welcome to the speaker series of the Soul Care program offered by Volunteer Hospice of Clarendon County. My name is Astrid Raffin-Peloz. I'm the Volunteers Manager, and I coordinate these types of programs. For those of you unfamiliar with Volunteer Hospice of Clarendon County, the organization was founded in 1978 by Rose Crumb, a nurse, on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State in the US. We are one of the very few independent hospices in the USA offering nursing care without billing Medicare or any other insurance company or the patients. All our services are provided free of charge, and we have a lot of flexibility in how we offer our services. Aside from this speaker series, we have monthly desk cafes called Tea to Die For at 4 p.m. in person on the peninsula in Port Angeles and in Sequim. The next speaker series will be on Wednesday, March 13. We called it Exploring the Good Death, and it will be with Jade Klemos. And I will put the flyer in the chat for those of you who are interested. And of course, the details are on the website. Our website is volunteerhospice.org. Today, however, I'm really happy to see such a big crowd for this topic, which is talking about Death Won't Kill You, how to have that conversation with Loretta Downs. Modern dying is really burdened by a death phobia so great that it sends many of us to emergency room and ICUs, where we accept aggressive and futile treatments at great expense. Hanging on by a thread, however, deprives us of the transformational opportunities that can appear at the end of life. If we talked openly about death, the one thing we all have in common, how would our lives change? Loretta will explain the death positive movement and how it is changing beliefs, treatment options, traditions, and end-of-life rituals. Her 8 practices for creating peaceful transitions through life and death evolved from supporting thousands of people living the end of their lives, their loved ones, and on occasion, their companion animals. These practices will guide you to recognize opportunities for conversation about end of life and to engage in the meaningful process of advanced care planning. Loretta Downs, our speaker, MACSA, and maybe she'll tell us about those letters, is an uplifting and inspiring speaker who is passionate about improving the end-of-life experience. She has studied death and supported the dying since her first friend died of AIDS in 1985. Her perspective comes from decades of serving the dying and their loved ones as a hospital, hospice, and nursing home volunteer and as a death doula. She has a master's degree in gerontology and is a past president of the Chicago End-of-Life Care Coalition. She's a certified senior advisor, here are those letters, CSA, end-of-life care practitioner, advanced care planning facilitator, and a death doula. She created the chrysalis room concept for loved ones of residents dying in long-term care settings to have a private, sacred space for keeping vigil. She gives seminars and workshops, has published numerous articles, has been quoted in articles and books, interviewed for podcasts, and is featured in an award-winning documentary about the importance of care planning. Her website is www.endoflifeinspirations.com. I will put this in the chat as well. And we have a resource sheet that she will also make available. I will put it in the chat, and it will also be sent to you with the recording. So without any further ado, Loretta, it's a pleasure to have you among us, and I will let you take it from here. Thank you.
Thanks, Astrid. Thank you, John, for managing anything that might happen here. It's possible. Now, with all of those credentials that I've acquired, it's the experience of being with people who were living their end of their lives that have been my greatest teacher. And now I'm officially old. I'm 74. And when I think this year I'll be 3/4 of a century old, I'm thinking, am I prepared enough to die? In 2023, I had 8 friends die. And it's kind of when I was living during the AIDS epidemic in the 80s, when many of my friends, because I worked in a creative industry where there were a lot of gay men who were using their creativity to make life so much better for everyone. I spent 6 years on an AIDS ward at a hospital in Chicago where I lived, and learned there were two experiences with people who were dying. There were those who didn't accept the fact that they were dying and they fought it, and their families fought it, and the patients were having really harsh symptoms. And I saw arguments in the hall and in patients' rooms with families who weren't able to let go or accept what was happening. And then there was a whole different experience for other patients who were having parties in their rooms. Friends were bringing decorations for the holidays and events, and we'd let them slip in small pets. And it was a living experience rather than people trying not to be dying. And those patients tended to go into hospice care. And this was in the middle 1990s, when hospice was still something kind of foreign. It wasn't a word that was used at all. It wasn't until 2000 when, this is being 74. I think some of you understand it. Dan Moyers did a series called On Our Own Terms, and that brought hospice awareness to the entire country. And that also formed a lot of end-of-life care coalitions around the country. And I got involved with one of those at the same time I became an official hospice volunteer. Now I'm in Mexico. I've moved to a retirement community. There are a lot of Canadian and American retirees here who are expats. I'd like to say we chase the warm weather, but as you can see today, it's a little chilly. I'm up in the mountains in a place called Ajijic. And here, the Day of the Dead, which you can see the painting behind me, is a constant reminder of mortality. And if I should say anything that brings up uncomfortable emotions for you because of something that's happened for you or to you, I'm going to ask you to look at that, recognize it, and set it aside so you can hear the rest of what I have to say. But go back and explore that. Because dying, as one of my chaplain friends said, is a spiritual experience with medical implications. And there are a lot of ways that people die. You know, we read the newspaper every day, and there's violence and tragedy. Actually, unintentional deaths are the fourth highest cause of death in America. But I'm talking about the natural dying process from a disease. So I want to move forward with that. Oh, and we're going to talk about my dog Paco in a little bit too. He may make his presence known. Shh. Thank you. The death positive movement started a number of years ago, and a woman named Caitlin Doughty, some of you may have seen her videos. She's got some terrific YouTubes. She believes, and I'm going to quote her, that people who are death positive believe that it is not morbid or taboo to speak openly about death. They see honest conversations about death and dying as the cornerstone of a healthy society. Now, we Americans and pretty much North Americans tend to have terrible death avoidance, and it's not helping us. We are not having the good death that so many of us say we want to have, in a home in our own bed, ideally with hospice caring for us. And it's not happening. Like 70% of us say we want to die at home, and 70% of us are dying in institutions. So I'm hoping that I'm going to give you some ways to see opportunities to talk about dying and death in positive terms, to take some of that fear and anxiety away from saying he died, she's dead, instead of passed away, left. And if you say to a child, I lost my sister, the kid will say, can I help you find her? So it's important that we start using the words, they're very simple words, use them more and more, and take some of this discomfort out of facing death. The death positive movement has engendered a lot of creative new beliefs and attitudes and ideas. There's a whole funeral process now. We have more choices than ever before. It's not burial and cremation, it's burial and aquamation, where you can have remains subjected to a water process, and they come out like a gel, and you can put them in the earth and they're naturally transformed. There's composting, body composting. There have been a lot of articles. Body composting is legal in Washington, and more states are getting legalization for it. And I read a quote in a newspaper article from a man who was seeking funding for his body composting company. And he said that one of his potential funders, the rich people, said, "Oh, we don't invest in anything that's awful like pornography or death." And I thought, how could they possibly have those two put together in the same attitude? But this is what we're up against, trying to change the minds of people that death is a natural process. If you have anything to write on, I want you to do this. And if you don't, I want you to do it later. This is a lesson from a very expensive time management program for business executives that I took 21 years ago. You're going to draw a line on the piece of paper, and on this side is your birth, and this is your death. I want you to draw a line where you are today. Again, the purpose of this is how to manage your time. If you were an executive, they would say planning ahead. I'm going to say, I really think I can commit to probably being pretty close here, right there. I'm like that. I call this the ooh la la time. Wherever it is, whatever you've got left, it's up to you to how to use it and how to make it and what to do with it and who you want to be in this remaining time. Whatever happened from today back, you can't change. You can't change. It happened. What we can do with the past is learn from it and not carry around negative feelings. I talk to people all the time who've lost someone years and years ago and said, "Oh, I didn't do enough." Well, we do what we can with what we have to use and the information we have available for us at any point in time. So I want you to congratulate yourselves for everything you did in the past and what you've learned from it so you don't repeat it in the future. And I'm a human. I'm an ordinary human. I've had rough times in my life. I've had a lot of losses. I've done some things I would not repeat. And I'm not going to waste time, what I've got left. So I'm encouraging you to look at this. I have one posted on my refrigerator. I look at it. I don't always see it, but I look at it all the time. And it did shift me about how I want to use my time. Funeral planning has shifted. People are doing living funerals. Someone called them a funeral. I mean, that it depends on who you are. And we all have different attitudes about this. I attended a celebration of life for a woman who was in her 60s, her late 60s here. She got cancer and did treatment for a while and decided that the treatment was ruining her quality of life and that she didn't have a lot of time. It wasn't going to make her better. So she decided to stop treatment and gathered all of her girlfriends. They created a share the care team. Everybody came and visited her. She was living like those pre-hospice patients on the AIDS unit. She had decided to live the rest of her life. And she threw a party. It was at an outdoor restaurant. When you went in, there was one of her friends all dressed up. It was in the afternoon, sitting at a table, handing out 2 drink tickets. And there's a pool in this restaurant patio, and the girlfriends had made giant paper flowers and all kinds of construction colors, and they were in the pots around the pool, and they'd set up a little throne room for Linda. And next to her were 2 chairs. She was all dolled up. She had a corona of flowers in her hair. And there was a table next to her with little trinkets on it and things, things that meant something to her. And there was a dead tree with little plastic bags with jewelry. And everyone who came in went over and said hello, and she told us to take something. And I took these earrings. I didn't know her. I only worked with her for a few months. I didn't know her well, but I loved telling her story. I sat with 3 other women. I knew only one of them. And I asked, "How do you feel about this?" And one of them said, "This is creepy." And the other said, "This is beautiful. I'm so glad we can gather like this instead of later after she's died. And there were mariachis came later and everybody got food. And it really was a celebration of her life. And I asked her in the middle of that day, how do you feel about what's happening? And she said, I'm excited. I'm going home. And that's how I want to feel when I reach my deathbed. I don't want to be afraid. And while talking about death won't kill you, I know it will improve the quality of your life and the quality of your death. I'm going to tell you some stories. Again, I want you to see opportunity in everything I'm telling you about today. I have developed 8 practices, and I call them practices because they're ongoing. They're not something you're going to do once and let go of. It's just become part of your lifestyle. And despite all the years I'd been working with people at the end of life, in 2000, my mother went into long-term care, which I'm sure many of you have had loved ones, because now we have assisted living, which is keeping a lot of people out of long-term care. And when I started going to long-term care in 1999 with my mom, nursing homes weren't using hospice very much. They were sending residents to the hospital. And I knew how much better the end of life could be with hospice care, certainly the pain management mattered. So I got involved at the nursing home. And the first thing I learned was that accepting mortality changes everything. And it's not easy. The human being psychologically can't imagine not being here. You know, we live in our bodies. We're not our bodies. They're the containers. We make them. The event that turned me around was the Thanksgiving after my mother died. It was 2006. And I was sitting at the table with 12 of my most important family members, from my 22-year-old godson who was on his way to Iraq with the Marines, to my 92-year-old Aunt Vera, who was the last of my mother's 5 siblings to still be living. And grace was said in this household. It's God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And as the head of the house finished that prayer, I said, I had this awareness, one of us at the table will be the first to die, and one will be the last. Even in this group that we've gathered today, one of us will be first and one will be last. Can't change that. I often allow myself that awareness when I'm with people I love and care about. Sometimes it's a dinner party. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 of us. I allow myself that awareness. And in my experience, it's very difficult to be angry with somebody when you realize you won't have them forever. And sometimes I'm very aware of that, and we'll have a conversation about it, which I'm going to tell a story later about that. So I started to have a panic attack, and they passed the food around, and I filled my plate twice and decided to come back into the present moment and not be caught up in future thinking. And I had a lovely dinner, and my godson came back from Iraq, and my Aunt Vera died 2 years later. But on my way home from dinner, I thought, what happens if I'm in a car accident today? My older sister, she's 15 years older than I am, would have to take care of everything. And she had no idea what I wanted. She had no idea what kind of medical care I would want if I weren't dead, just badly harmed. She had no idea where any of my stuff was. She didn't know what mattered most to me. I live alone. Nobody knew all these things. So I made a commitment by Valentine's Day. I was going to do my advanced directives. And I called my sister up because I wanted her to be my power of attorney for healthcare. I said, Dolores, I'd like you to do this. And she said, Loretta, you're my baby sister. I don't want you to ever die. This is how our loved ones love us. They don't want us to ever die. And sometimes they won't let us die the way we want to die. especially if we've never talked to them about what matters most to us. So I did complete my advanced directives, and I was very careful. I said, I live alone. I've been single a long time. And one of the things I wrote in my directives was, I want chocolate ice cream, not vanilla. I want lipstick on my lips because I already look dead without it. I want my girlfriends to tweeze my chin hairs because I'm Italian. And I go around the nursing home and I see all these poor women who I know would be vain otherwise. And so I wanted to be groomed. Classical music only. My sister would be listening to country and western, not my preference. And I want no television on anywhere near me. Those are very small things, but they're part of my quality of life. And it also lightened the whole experience when I was talking to my sister about what was important to me at the end of my life. And I hope to have time to finesse all of my wishes at the end of life. But what about being last? I mean, that takes different preparation. As I said, I had lost 8 friends of mine died last year. Some of them I was supporting in their deaths. Some of them weren't here. I think we all have that problem now. We don't live where all of our loved ones live. You know, I moved to Mexico. I did have 2 friends that came and bought houses nearby, but mostly my people aren't here. So I've made a terrific effort. Zoom is wonderful. I remember when FaceTime first happened and hospices didn't want to use it because of the HIPAA problem. You know, well, we don't know, people might see something. And now it's an automatic offering. Do you want to have a FaceTime or a Zoom or a WhatsApp with someone you love? I've been in settings where people were calling all of their loved ones to say, Mom's dying now, she's actively dying. One woman told me that she reached her son, the dying woman's grandson, while he was driving. And she said, pull your car off the road, get off the road. Grandma wants to talk to you. And she just wanted to say, I love you, goodbye. How meaningful was that with a modern technology tool? Speaking of this, another opportunity, and I want you to all consider spending 99 cents on an app called We Croak. Can you see this little frog? See my frog? Yeah, okay. It's called We Croak. It was developed by a young man who went to New York and rented an Airbnb. He was an app developer, and the woman who owned the apartment was a marketing person. And they got into a conversation about how people in Bhutan believe that if you contemplate death 5 times a day, you'll be happy. And Bhutan is always at the top of the happiest countries list that somebody publishes every year. So 5 times a day, I get a little message. I get a number and there's a message. It says, click here for a quote. Remember, you will die. Click here for a quote. And they're all different. This one says, the world has been abnormal for so long that we've forgotten what it's like to live in a peaceful and reasonable climate. If there is to be any peace or reason, we have to create it in our own hearts and homes. We Croak, 99 cents. So advanced care planning, do your legal things. If you own anything, the other day, a friend of mine told me about a friend of his, he's been partnered, not married for 50 years. They did not get married. The condo that the survivor is living in will have to be sold because they weren't married, so he couldn't inherit it. And there was no reasonable will done. I had another friend who died 2 years ago worth $12 million. His will was 20 years old. And it's just a shame what happened to the money because he hadn't updated his will from the time he was worth $2 million. It was all real estate that had appreciated. So I encourage you, if you have anything, to be sure it goes where you want it to and protect your assets from unnecessary taxation. I mean, you know, you worked hard for whatever you have. And if you don't have anything, then you won't have the same problems because it is problems of abundance. Preparation. Sickness. We all are going to die from something. You know, one day you're going to wake up with a lump or pain that doesn't go away, or fluid coming out of somewhere that wasn't, or you're in an accident that you didn't die in. And shared decision-making in critical illness is become a buzzword in hospitals. A lot of doctors aren't trained to talk about dying. Even the oncologists, and sometimes it's harder for them because they're working so hard to keep people going longer. We have to take charge of this. We have to decide early on these awarenesses, the dinner table when you know one of you won't be there sometime. Looking at news reports. Well, do I want that to happen? I mean, celebrating Jimmy, our president, our ex-president, Jimmy Carter, has been in hospice for a year. He's almost 100. I mean, there's so many good stories, and not just the tragic ones, but I make myself aware that could happen to me, and what would I do? What would I do? And then I just let it go. I don't dwell on it. I allow it to become part of my practice. So when you're talking to your doctor, you're diagnosed with something, ask what this means. What does this mean for me? What are my options? Where is this going to go? You define your quality of life every minute of every day. What you're drinking, this is a Jamaica. Wine would be nice, but it's not. We define our quality of life, what you put in your tea in the morning or your coffee, or if you have something cold to drink. Like I want chocolate ice cream, not vanilla. Socks on my feet, they're cold all the time. I want these things. And I also am defining the quality of my death in the same way. We can. This is about having choice. And the essence of freedom is having choice. You know, options at the end of life. You will have to ask your doctor for palliative care. He or she is unlikely to suggest it when you're critically ill. They don't like to use the word terminal ill because it's uncomfortable. They're humans too. I have a consult with a palliative care doctor once a week. He works at a very large hospital in Chicago. And some of the stories of families being unable to accept what is, and to create a way of transforming what's happening into something spiritual and something sacred. I mean, these are the two most sacred events in our lives. And it's up to each of us to have something to say about designing the end, because we didn't have much to say about the beginning. Palliative care, hospice, I told you, the hospice stories I've had, just the transformational opportunity that death allows, how we grow from realizing we're mortal. And my sister, I used to hang up from talking to my sister, and I'd have to call her back and apologize. It was happening all the time. She'd say something and I'd go, "Oh, Dolores," and get snarky, and then I'd hang up and I'd feel so terrible. And I realized one day she's not going to be here all the time. And my sister was a retired pediatric nurse in the old days when the doctor's office was a place she and the woman who ran the desk took vacation when the doc took off and washed the walls in the office. This is like 40 years ago. And my sister one day woke up with yellow eyeballs 7 years ago. Not a good thing. And I'm not a doctor, I'm not medical, I know a lot, we were both kind of in denial. Yellow eyeballs, we knew it wasn't good. Went to her doctor and he was a little bit in denial too. And it took a couple of weeks to get a positive diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. And they offered her a very radical surgery. She was 83. She had 3 different heart conditions and she almost did it. And I did some research and we talked some more and she said, "Oh, I'm not going to do that. I would rather have fun." We had birthday parties, we had Christmas, we had Thanksgiving. Some of my favorite pictures were taken in that last year of her life. I took her 2 granddaughters to Italy because they're Italian and I'm half Italian. And we called her from sitting on a canal in Venice one night. And these things that the girls will remember and will all remember, it was just important that grief is a sneaky Pete, isn't it? Yeah, some incredible memories of that time. And my sister and I continued to visit the nursing home where my mom lived, where I had the first chrysalis room. 12 years after she died, we were in this nursing home for 20 years. And we made friends with a lot of residents. I became power of attorney for a few of them. And she was visiting one day and she fell. She'd been in chemo for already 14 months and she was starting to have some uncomfortable side effects. Excuse me. And she fell. They called me. I met her in the emergency room. She was in a lot of pain. The doctor came in, a young, very calm, very efficient young woman, and said, well, you fractured your pelvic bone and there's nothing we can do to fix it. We'll move you to a rehab, which means a nursing home rehab. We'll move you to a rehab, period. And I could see the look at my sister's face. I said, well, you can go to the Fairmont. Everybody knows you there. You'll get great care. Another doctor came in with some morphine and my sister said, here, take all my things. And I said, I'll come back tomorrow. She wanted to stay. She wouldn't let me stay. This is another thing. Some people don't want you around. Let them have their privacy. Don't ever feel guilty when you leave somebody who's asked you to leave them. And even if you've been there for 2 days and you're exhausted and you need to leave, don't feel guilty. Just follow your heart. Your heart knows. And I left and I called her in the morning and asked what she wanted. She said, bring my glasses. I was going to go to her apartment. And an hour later, her daughter called and said the doctor had called her. Her mother didn't have a pulse, come quickly. And I was the closest one. I zoomed over to the hospital. And I got there, the sign on the door, handwritten, said, see the doctor. I just opened the door. And my sister is sprawled out in bed, lights on her, trash on the floor. She had a DNR, but they did something. The covers were all a mess. And as I'm pulling the door shut, feeling the anger boil up, a young woman came over and I said, how could you let anyone walk into that room? Clean it up, make her look like she's asleep, and please make us some coffee. And as I finished, 2 doctors came over, a tall, thin man who looked like I used to dream I wanted my doctor to look like, kind of Marcus Welby, you know, gray hair, gray coat, calm. His tag said, Dr. Loving Her. And next to him was a petite, blonde, round woman, doctor in huge letters, Anna. And I started to cry and laugh because our mother's name is Anna. What are the odds that I'm standing outside the door where my sister has just died in the room and I'm met by Dr. Loving Her and Anna? And I said, would one of you hug me? And they both did. And I cried and it just was a beautiful release. We have to cry. Crying is like peeing. If you don't do it when you need to, it backs up in very unpleasant ways. I think not just because I'm Italian, I talk with my hands and I cry easily. It's healthy. Emotions are, I believe it's healing to face our emotions, even the most uncomfortable ones. And if you're with somebody who's grieving and crying, don't do anything, just listen, stand there. You hand them a Kleenex, it breaks up the emotion. Just give them a little time and it'll pass through and then you can hold them, give them the tissues, a hand on the arm, something gentle to acknowledge that you've heard and felt what they're feeling. It made the difference to me. And they did clean up the room and I had them tip the blinds so natural light would come in, turn off the overheads. And her daughter arrived and, you know, we were ready, but not, it was a sudden death, as ready as we were. But I know my sister made that decision. She said, I'm not going to a nursing home for the rest of my life. My kids can't come and have a beer. I can't make them my favorite pasta salad. I'm not going to do it. And she let go. So I think that sharing the journey with people who are on it is a way we learn. It's a way we learn that everything we've done has been right. It's a way we learn to make decisions for our own future, for our own living and our own dying, and supporting people who are. I mean, that's, before I die, I'm going to have a lot of more people I love and a lot of clients I have to be present for. One day in the nursing home, the last year of my mother's life, she was in hospice 3 times. And I can tell you it was not easier signing that paperwork the 3rd time. It wasn't easier. And she wouldn't wake up one day. And they, of course, shipped her to the hospital. Tests showed no stroke, no nothing. I think she was just tired. And she wasn't eating and drinking. And a doctor took me out in the hall and said, your mom's not eating. We need to put in a feeding tube or she'll starve to death. Now, this was 2006. I think there's a lot more awareness now in doctors. I don't think that would be, but maybe that's still said. And having had hospice experience, I knew that not eating and drinking is a natural part of the end of life. That people, you don't want to take in because your organs are trying to shut down. And I said, no, we're taking her home. We'll put her in hospice. So we got her back to the room, and I was very busy doing things. She was awake, and I had flowers and candy in the jar, so the aides would come in often and straightened her bed and things. And they got the ambulance people put her in bed. And I said, Mom, what else can I do for you? And she looked at me and said, just be with me. And I took off my shoes and got in bed with her. And a part of all of my subsequent visits, and I was visiting 5 nights a week. Actually, the nursing home had pretty good food and I don't cook. So I was going for dinners. And I talked with the other daughters and sons and nieces and nephews who visited. She said, I got in bed with her. And it was like, I'd get in bed and we'd drink coffee with ice cream in it because that's what she liked. And some really, one day I said to her, Mom, if something happens to you, what do you want us to do? Because I wasn't skilled like I am now. And she said, you girls will know what to do. And that was good confidence giving, actually, because she could see how we were caring for her and the other residents that we'd become friendly with. But presence. And the first thing a hospice volunteer learns is to listen. Just be present. And that's so important in life in general. I have a lot of friends, and I think part of it is because I'm single and I have more time for friends, but also because I'm a good listener. And that was a gift I got from my hospice training, because as you can see, I'm also a talker. So we have more options now for end-of-life medical care than we've ever had, legal options. There's, of course, palliative care, which comes before hospice. You can have palliative care where you're also having curative treatments. Often cancer patients will get palliative care consults to see how they can manage symptoms better, like constipation and pain, all the other things that often come with aggressive treatments. Hospice, which I can't talk highly enough about hospice, and it's so wonderful that the Volunteer Hospice of Clallam County is in its 45th year. They're having a big party, I think, right? Coming up. Statistically, though, according to the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization, 10% of hospice patients are in hospice for 2 or fewer days. I know of so many cases where people die in the ambulance from the hospital to home. They are at least out of the hospital, but that's not good. 25%, 5 or fewer days. And the median stay in hospice is 18 days. That's hardly enough time. This is a manifestation of the lack of acceptance issue. If we want to avoid the idea of dying and wind up in the hospital like this. And how many of you have either said or heard, oh, just pull the plug? Yeah, well, there are a lot of plugs today, and it's not like unplugging your vacuum cleaner. Disconnecting a person from life support is a very unpleasant and scary and awful thing, and they're usually on life support for a while before they're disconnected. Sometimes it's effective if it's important to get family members to come, accidental cases when you're taken to an ER. There are reasons, organ donation, hospital need to keep a body working in order to do organ donation. But again, the more awareness you have about what's important to you, not the people who love you, what's important to you, so you can have this kind of end of life. Yeah, with a little chocolate ice cream on the bed. There was a time when I wanted my friends to dip a sponge in vodka too, but I've decided I'd rather have the ice cream. But maybe, yeah. And when I used to smoke, okay, I'm going to talk about transformation later, but there was a time when breakfast for me was a cigarette and a cup of coffee. Can any of you identify with that? Yeah, it took me 7 years to quit smoking too. I was 43. And now it's yogurt and blueberries and granola. We can change. We can change our minds. Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, if you haven't read it, give it a read. He was a psychiatrist during World War II in Germany, and the Nazis assigned him to concentration camps. And he wrote a book after that experience and said that no matter what happens to a person, all the things a person can lose, you have one thing. We have one thing that we have control over, and that's our attitude. You can decide to be positive or negative. You can decide to like something or dislike something. But we can change our minds, and this is part of the growth process. And older age, that's I think our job in old age is to nurture wisdom, is to nurture goodness and kindness and being gentle people. It's not to nurture anger and frustration and all the things that cause bad behavior. And we can do it. It's our choice. I'm a perfect example of that. And I definitely want this to be my death. I don't want to go. Just lost full screen. Yes. Okay. So hospice, okay. Voluntarily stopping eating and drinking for people who are not 6 months ahead of death, but are just having a terrible struggle with their medical condition. You can voluntarily stop eating and drinking, and you can get hospice support once you decide to do that. It's challenging. There's some lovely books on it. Astrid is going to post a page that I've put together of some resources. There's some books, there are some videos, there are some news articles to read, and there's some three Netflix that I highly recommend that you look. One of them is called 100 Days with Tata. And if you don't have Netflix, find a friend who does. It's from Spain with subtitles. And it's about a woman who in the first section is 91, and she has this beautiful love relationship with the grandson of her sister. She has no children. And he's an amazing guy. He's kind of a Taylor Swift of Spain. Nobody's Taylor Swift, I think, but a big deal, very interesting man. He talks a lot about himself. And then the second part, she's 95 and it's COVID, and he can't find a caregiver he can pay to stay with her because it's COVID. They all want to be home with their families. And the 100 days that he lives with her are just magnificent. And I've watched it twice. It's just lovely. So you have that. Medical aid in dying. Legal in Washington and 9 other states and the District of Columbia. Medical aid in all of Canada. You might not know. Canada legalized medical aid in dying in 2016. It is at the moment, it's like hospice, 6 months trajectory to death, 6 months or less. there's an application process. The patient has to write. You have to have 2 doctors approve your application. They have to be sure you're not depressed. Although I think depression, if you've got 6 months to live, is one of the responses, one of the natural responses. Disbelief, some depression, some anger, Kubler-Ross's stages. It's costly, mostly it's educated, Caucasian people who are taking advantage of it. More and more people are taking advantage of it as awareness grows. Canada is in the process of creating regulations for people with dementia to do advanced care planning, or illnesses where they're not dying, but they will be from the disease, neurological diseases, things that people have control over the timing of their death. And people, we don't really want to die. We don't. Life's great, even when it's hard. It's what we've got, right? But pain is pretty awful. And a lot of other things, it's a personal choice when enough is enough. And that's why I encourage you to take opportunities to think about your quality of death in relationship to your quality of life. Dementia, there are now dementia advanced directives available. You can Google them. The Alzheimer's Association, which is a very robust website, a lot of information and help. There's a Dr. Gasser has an advanced directive for people with dementia. Basically, they all say, I can't feed myself, I don't want to be fed by another human being or a machine. That is a form of control. These will be finessed and enhanced over time because the statistics on dementia are showing a tsunami with us baby boomers aging. It's important to have some awareness. I already have 2 friends that are probably starting dementia. I've had a number of friends already die from dementia, so my awareness is keen. And they've taught me how to deal with people with dementia. This is avoidance. People in nursing homes don't get visitors. Like 60% of nursing home residents do not get visitors. And now the higher percentage of people in nursing homes have dementia because there are more people staying in assisted living longer. They've changed the regulations. When assisted living first started about 30 years ago, you couldn't be in a wheelchair. That happened to my mom. She was in assisted living in 1998 and 9. 88, yeah, 1998 and 99. And she stopped walking one day from stenosis in her spine. And she was forced to move into a nursing home. That's not happening now. People can be in wheelchairs. They can hire extra help, which many do because there's not enough help. But the dementia situation, there's going to be much more awareness. They can't seem to find any kind of cure or medication that slows it down, but there's more work going on. So I think it's important to learn how to relate to people who are having critical illnesses. No judgment. Oh, that's hard for me. I have been trained to assess situations. I was in sales for 30 years to assess people and make judgments pretty quickly, how I can relate, how I can sell you what I've got to sell. And I've had to untrain myself to just accept what people are telling me about themselves. They're always right. Can't say, oh, you're this or you're that. Oh, is that what you are? Practice that. It's really, it's challenging. It's challenging. I know it because I'm constantly practicing. I have a girlfriend. I go, oh, you're this or you're that. And I go, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, she's this and she's that. It's okay. That's who she is. I love her. Just love her up. Even sometimes I get annoyed, but we work that out. I'm able to be more transparent. On my website is a 3-minute slideshow. It's Chrysalis End of Life Inspirations. And when you see the handout, my contact information is on my handout at the bottom. I'm happy to answer emails. I love emails. I write, my website has some of my articles posted, but there's a 3-minute video of my mom's last 8 days of life and the hours after her death that is tender. She was in hospice care. She was in the chrysalis room, a private room in the nursing home where everybody else has double rooms. And you can see how she was cared for, how those of us who visited her cared for her. My best friend from high school, who was still around, came. We fed her ice chips. She pretty much slept for 8 days. The first picture is her at her 93rd birthday party in September with her hospice chaplain, who was a giant man, kind of hovering over her. And then there's a picture of her when she actually did have a stroke. And we took her to the emergency room, and she was afraid. She was holding my hand very tightly, and the doctor wanted to keep her overnight. And I said, no, we're gonna take her home and love her up. And I brought an air mattress and stayed in the nursing home with her for that week. And then there's a photo of her when she dies, and she's on a blue butterfly pillow. And then you see unexpectedly, the hospice aide was scheduled that morning. We didn't even know she was coming, and she showed up, and you can see how she bathed my mother. Just a lot of people, this is a new death ritual too, and hospice encourages it, to bathe the body, because it's first of all, it's one of your last gifts to the person. And there's something about the awareness of touching a body whose soul has left. That's basically what's happened. Sometime people have reported a change in temperature in the room. People have reported seeing some like steam, not steam is the wrong word, just a little something coming out of the mouth. Buddhists believe we leave from the top of our heads through the top chakra. There's so many beliefs because we don't really know. The mystery of dying is one of the reasons we don't like to talk about it. We're afraid of it because there's a lot of mystery. A lot of mystery. Appearances of things. My mother saw her mother the month before she died. She walked into her room. I said, Mom, what are you looking at? Well, there's a woman at the bottom of my bed. Who is that? And I said, I don't know. Who is that? Instead of saying, oh, no, there isn't, Mom. Who is that? It's my mother. And her mother had died 50 years before. And then it was gone. And I knew that was sort of my awareness. Very often, there's a beautiful book on my list, The Final Gifts. Writes a part of it about visions at the end of life. I've seen other hospice patients have some awareness that there was someone there and be peaceful with it and die shortly thereafter. Yeah. So the video, I encourage you to take a few moments to look at that sometime when you're in the mood. It's actually very comforting, I've been told, and I know it is for me. So sharing the journey. Another practice is forgiveness. Dr. Ira Byock wrote a book a number of years ago called The 4 Things That Matter Most. Before you say goodbye, I love you. Some of us find that hard to say. I'm sorry for anything I ever did that might have hurt your feelings. Would you forgive me for whatever I might have done to hurt you? I didn't mean to, or if I meant to, I'm really sorry. Thank you. Thank you for being in my life. I will say those things in the right moment with the right person. My high school friend, Stephanie, whose health is really not good right now. She's also 74 and a half. And not long ago, we were sitting at lunch, and I just took her hand and leaned over and said all those things to her. And we both had things to forgive each other for and to say I'm sorry for. And we've just had the best time. It's like there's not enough time to not get that out of me. And I'm happy. I'm happier than I've ever been. And I've had 2 very serious depressions in my life. It's like I want to tell you my big practice partner. Come here, Paco. Come here, Paco. Paco, come here, I want to show you to these people. Come here. I've been very quiet. This is my practice partner. I talk to Paco about dying all the time. I mean, really a lot. And we lay in bed and I say, Paco, one day I may have to make a decision to stop your suffering. I'm going to have to decide what that is, what your suffering is, but I'm going to take care of you. And I promise that I will not let you suffer. And then I say, Paco, if something happens to me first, I've made arrangements for Cece to take you. And I've left money for her and I've made written arrangements for her. Oh, he's being really good today. And then he gets a massage and we both get treats. And it's over. Isn't it over, Paco? Okay, go in your bed. Go in your bed. It's over. I actually had a dog in hospice at my house this weekend, a boxer that I rescued and took him to a shelter and he didn't get adopted. And the vet found him full of cancer 2 weeks ago. And they took him back to the shelter because all the volunteers love him. His name is Santiago, who's a famous Spanish boxer. And he was here for 3 days and 3 nights. And he had really good food. And 3 of the volunteers came before the vet did, and they fed him bacon. This is good. Took him for a walk, gave him bacon, lots of massages, hospice care. You know, I think I'm very serious about the gifts of hospice care. Oops, I just lost my view. Paco, thank you, Paco. So talk about it, look for opportunities to talk about dying anytime you can. Forgiveness, the 4 things, and start with yourself. We have to forgive ourselves first for whatever is on your, if when you think of something and go, oh, God, just say, hey, wait a minute. Okay, I'm not perfect. I'm always getting better. I can do this. Oh, there's a dog. Oh, I love that. Great. What a beauty. Oh, I love labs. Oh, suddenly I have a different view. I see all of you now. Yeah, I'm not very good at tech either. Well, this is great. Oh, everybody's coming up. John, did you do that? Oh, gorgeous. Gorgeous. Thank you for being here. I have friends who won't invite me to dinner anymore because the subject of death is surely going to come up, and often it's them that brings it up. And then I do have a lot of people that can't wait to talk to me. Oh, this is great. Thank you. I've seen hard deaths, and they've all happened because people weren't prepared and they weren't talking about it with the people who love them. And we have to look. The Conversation Project is one of the links I've given you. It's a very important website. And very moved. Like I said, I'm Italian, I cry easily. Ellen Goodwin is a journalist, and she had a personal experience, and she decided that we need to have these conversations. And a number of years ago, she started the Conversation Project. It was 2015. And the Conversation Project emphasizes having a conversation on values. What matters to you, not what's the matter with you. And she said, in my own adulthood, and she's older, she's 80 now, I think. In my own adulthood, the culture of birth changed. It wasn't a doctor who first tossed out the stirrups and ushered in fathers and video cameras and birthing rooms. It was parents who said, birth is not just a medical experience, it's a human experience. And now we're finally saying that dying too is not just a medical experience, it's a deeply human experience. We walk each other home. Where I live, we've left our families, so we create families of friends, and we help each other. But I'm teaching us here how to have these conversations, because the people here came to retire and, you know, play pickleball and and paint and have drum circles. And we're dying, we're all old, and it's happening. So I encourage you to go to the Conversation Project. They have toolkits for having the conversation with loved ones, and they have a toolkit for talking to your doctor, because I can assure you, your doctor is not going to be any more comfortable with this than anyone else who cares about you. The Conversation Project, sharing the journey. Oh, forgiveness. Yeah, forgive yourself. And another practice, letting go. Whoa, letting go. It's not giving up. They're very different things, very different. There may be a time where you're not letting go, but not giving up. Giving up is struggle. Letting go is a surrender. It feels so good to like letting go of a bad idea, or finally making a decision about something and letting go of confusion. It feels so good. Completing all your advanced directives so you can feel like this when you're done. This photo is called First Snow. And for those of you who are in places where snow comes when you're a kid, the first time it snows, you're elated. That's what you're going to feel like when you finish all your advanced directives. I can promise you that. Letting go. Start with your closets and your drawers and your garages. Don't fool around. I am right now in a state, I made a promise for January. Anytime I open a drawer, anything in it I haven't touched for 2 years, I'm pitching. And if somebody else can use it, it's going. Once the drawers are done, the closets are going to get hit. Now, I've moved many times in my life, so I've let go of a whole lot of stuff. But it's amazing how we accumulate, isn't it? You know, problems of abundance. There's still problems. Garages. Oh my goodness gracious! All those Christmas decorations. You know, just don't overwhelm yourself with any of this, please. Then you've got another. Oh, I should be doing this. Should. When you feel the word should coming out of your mouth, put it back in. It's a very judgmental, critical word, and usually we're doing it to ourselves. I should not do that. I should do that. Please remember my words. Should. Eject. Letting go of stuff you don't need, giving it to somebody who can use it, or just realizing that it's, yes, unfortunately, a burden of trash in the world. Swedish death cleaning. There's a book by that title. It's also on my handout. In fact, one of the famous comedians whose name is now escaping me has an HBO show called Swedish Death Cleaning. Amy Poehler, very funny woman. So if you have HBO, check that out. Just do it. You'll feel so much better when it's done. Healing grief. Grieving is as natural as breathing. I want to say this is a quote. I love this from David Brooks. He writes for the New York Times. It's often the ordeals that seem the most significant. It's what we struggle in life that becomes such a part of us and so much trouble for us. Said people shoot for happiness, but feel formed through suffering. And that's true. This is part of how we grow. It's Viktor Frankl's point. I think, you know, how we search for the meaning in our life. Oh, I'm seeing a dog get a massage. Thank you. My advanced directives, I want my hands and feet massaged. I'm very clear. The chocolate ice cream and the tweezers are just part of the light part, but I've got some serious demands of my caregivers for when I'm on my deathbed. And I can change as long as we're able to change our minds, we can change our minds. We have that freedom. David Brooks, check it out. Healing grief. The volunteer hospice has grief help. They have regular grief programs. Use them, take advantage of this. I mean, we're all grieving something. Someone once told me that the first loss we grieve is our first haircut, because we didn't have control. Your mom took you to the barber, or worse, she did it herself. And there's this sense of, oh, something changed in my life. So let yourselves process grief and heal from it. they've added, there used to be 5 stages of grief, and they've added 2 more, and one is the transformation out of the suffering of it, and the reconstruction. I mean, one of my favorite briefs, you might have known, Alex's Lemonade Stand. There was a 7-year-old girl who got a glioblastoma, which is one of the worst forms of brain cancer. There's no cure for it. And she had chemotherapy. Her parents did everything to extend her life and her quality of life. She had 2 other brothers. And one day she went up to her dad and said, I want a lemonade stand. I want to raise money for pediatric cancer. And he did. He built her this cute stand, painted Alex's Lemonade on it, and she raised $2,000, her first. I mean, who's not going to give money to a little bald girl? Really? And it continues. And her parents made this a big charity. They have raised millions. There's Kentucky Derby. Somebody sets up one there. People set them up at all kinds of events. There have been people who set them up at funerals to donate money. There are ways to transform grief into something really positive and healing for not only yourself, but other people. Because there's so much shared grief. I have a friend whose son died last year of an accidental drug overdose. And we're pretty sure it was accidental, but he had a history of struggles with it. And she's just having the hardest time coping. And she doesn't really want to, people have given her books, which she said she had a stack of books. I think books are wonderful, and I think it's good. I think it's helpful to ask people what they want, rather than just assuming they might want something, and watch your timing on that when you're going to reach out. Sometimes just, I'm thinking about you, makes more difference than you'd ever know. Thinking about you. It's a great line, because we understand what that means. The next practice is sourcing gratitude. Love this quote. It's from Elaine St. James. There's a self-expansive attitude of gratitude. Very possibly, it's a little-known law of nature. The more gratitude you have, the more you have to be grateful for. It regenerates. There's a website called gratefulness.org. Thank you. Gratefulness.org. It's run by Brother David Stendel Rast. He's a 95-year-old German monk, and it's beautiful. You can sign up for, you can. No one ever calls my home phone. Maybe it's my sister. I don't know. Hang on, I don't know how to do that. Stop. No, that's weird. David Stendel, you can sign up for a daily gratitude, 1 sentence, and I collect them. It just feels really, really wonderful to be able to process, to be reminded, because sometimes I wake up not in a good mood, and then I go, oh, right, grateful, good thing, gratefulness.org. And that's also on my page. So gratitude, and I find a lot of you are too busy, but service is just so satisfying, to do something that you don't get paid for, or something that you do get paid for, like Astrid does, or maybe you don't get paid either. Just to be able to serve someone who can't do anything for you. At gift and the reward. I've often said, being a hospice volunteer, I do a lot of volunteer work. I've been doing volunteer work since I was 16, and it really is satisfying, and it's kept me balanced and remind me how much good fortune I have, and my health. I don't do kids as well as I do old people, but I do old people really well. So come on down to Mexico when you get old, and I'll be glad to hold your hand. Gratitude and service. Just people keep gratitude journals. There's write 3 down every day before you go to sleep or when you wake up. All these practices become a part of you when you're doing them, and they heighten your awareness of your own mortality. Because one day you're going to face it. We all will. One of us is going to be the first, and one is going to be the last. And embarking on transformation is, we change every minute of every day, and the world is changing around us in ways over which we have no control. And sometimes I only read headlines now. I'll open up a news report if it's something I'm truly interested in. But some days I become overwhelmed with what's going on around the world, and I have no control over. All I can do is be my best me here, where I am, and be a role model for other people. We have a weekly English language newspaper, and the writer, one of the writers, one of the journalists, has been here 30 years. And she just posted a column for New Year's, be a gentler, kinder person. And she cited all the viciousness, the viciousness on Facebook. Why? Why bother? Say something nice. It's going to make you healthier. They've done studies on gratitude. People who practice gratitude are physically healthier and emotionally happier. Scientific studies. I love to quote that. So I encourage you very much to work on those two practices. And then there's transformation. The Buddhist belief, impermanence is the #1 practice in the Buddhist beliefs. And that is because everything changes. The seasons. What an opportunity to look at the seasonal change and think, wow, I'm going to change too. One day my leaves are going to fall off my tree, but I'm going to bloom again. And it's going to be cold, and then it's going to be hot, and all these changes. I'm changing what I'm wearing. I'm changing how I'm looking. Oh, I was in really bad light one day last week, and I looked at myself and went, when did that happen? Like, oh my goodness. The last time I looked, I was 50, and now I'm 74. No, it's not true. I embrace all this. It's like, I'm so grateful. I'm here. I'm able to talk to you. Maybe you'll go back with one thought that sticks. Transformation. Get rid of full thought. Let's see, can you see this? This was a birthday card. It's a policeman pulling over a driver that's a butterfly, and in his hand is the driver's license with a caterpillar on it. That's an old photo. I've changed. I've always loved butterflies, particularly monarchs. They're the Illinois state flower, state bug, state insect. And there used to be a lot of them. In fact, there used to be a lot of caterpillars that when I was a kid, they were walking around, we could find them. Never see a caterpillar anymore. Even here, we've lost a lot of butterflies, and I live pretty much in nature. And I started raising monarchs in 2000. I visited a girlfriend, and she had some jars on her windowsill in the kitchen with bugs in them. What's that? Oh, they're monarch caterpillars. And she gave me some milkweed. And listen, plant milkweed. Wherever you are, the monarchs will come if you have milkweed. They need milkweed to survive. They're an incredible little creature. And there's such a metaphor for transformation in such a beautiful way. They're all over my house. People give me butterflies, of course. And when I started raising monarchs, the transformation they go through is kind of symbolic of us too. They start as an egg, little egg on a leaf, and they hatch and they start eating the leaf. And for the first week of their life, all they do is eat and poop. Very similar. And if they were human, by the time they stop eating, they would be the size of a school bus. But they're about this big, and they're black and yellow and white striped. And one day, after about 10 days of eating, they stop eating, just like humans do. They stop taking in because they're going into their next stage of life. And they hang upside down in the shape of a J for about a day and a half. And one moment, the skin at the back of the head splits open, and the skin starts to crawl up the body, and what's inside is the chrysalis starting to show, and the caterpillar is spinning on this peg, working its way out of the skin of the caterpillar. The caterpillar is actually dying to become a chrysalis, to make it to the next stage. And when the skin is all the way up, there's this little green, pale green, acorn-shaped chrysalis. And when it's done, stops moving, the skin will fall off and it just sits there. And it looks like nothing's happening. It's just this green little, it'll be under a leaf or under, they crawl around when they're looking for a place to hang and transform. I found them in very unusual places. I used to keep a container at the nursing home where my mother was, and one of the residents was my co-curator. And in this chrysalis, that's where the miracle happens. And it's just like at the end of our lives when we're still, we're quiet. You know, before you die, you're quiet. You're working out all the things of your life. There's a life review that we believe happens. There's this processing of leaving our bodies. And as the butterfly starts to develop in another week to 10 days, you can see it forming. And one day, always in the morning, the chrysalis opens up and now it's just a transparent shell. You can Google this, a YouTube of it. And then this butterfly comes out and it's got a big fat body and little wings, and it spends about 5 minutes pumping fluid from its body into its wings, and they unfold and it kind of moves its wings because it's never been a butterfly before. This is new, all new, all new. And as it dries out, you can see it getting used to this whole new creature it is. It's the same genetic material. And then when it's dry, very often I can get one on my finger. They know what to do, just like we do. Just like we do. And for me, in my mind, and you can think whatever you want to think, one summer I released 300. I mean, I had a little factory going in my basement. I think that's what the moment of death feels like. Just getting out of the body that you're really tired of being in because it's not a healthy body anymore and you want to get out. And then you just go somewhere. And don't ask me where. I don't want that to be one of the questions. What happens after we die? I think it's a good thing, whatever it is. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. And my mother leaves coins on the street for me because she used to always bend down and pick up coins when she was out for a walk. I get messages. People tell me I did an all-day, my first hospice workshop in 2003. It was at a Catholic retreat center in New Orleans. A friend of mine, a Catholic nun who was one of my hospice teams, had led me to speak. And at the end of it, a woman came up to me and she said, a couple came up, their son had died of AIDS, and that they had become parent guides for other parents of children of AIDS. And at her son's funeral, a yellow butterfly landed on her shoulder, and yellow was his favorite color. And when I walked out of the conference hall, my room, it was a U-shaped building and my room was at the far end. So I walked out the back door and I had to go down the side of the building, which was open to the gardens. And I opened the door, and when I closed the door, there was a yellow butterfly. And it followed me to my room. And I think that was one of the early confirmations that I needed to keep doing this, because I'm not afraid to talk of dying. And a lot of people want to talk about dying and hear about it. And so there's that mystery of transformation. And I think that's a good place to end.
I think that's a wonderful place to end. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, this was really rich and very personal. And I made some notes, but I want to open up any question that you would like to ask Loretta. Please do. There are a couple of technical questions in the chat, and yes, you will get the handout with the recording. Sometimes after this session ends, I will send anyone who was registered the recording and the handout. But any other questions on the topic itself? I mean, you raised a lot of things for me that were really interesting, but
I'm looking, somebody mentioned Katie Butler. She gives a page and a half to my chrysalis room in her, The Art of Dying Well. We're friends. She is a good resource. Her book is excellent. My list.
She's a great resource. She had posted on her Facebook group a list of important documents to keep track of. I personally did that before my trip to Europe a couple of months ago. It was 11 pages, and every single one aspect of my life has been now documented. And before we left, we sent a USB drive to a person that we trust. And I felt really, like you mentioned earlier, elated and relieved, because all that stuff, if something happened while I was traveling, was going to be taken care of.
And if you're single, it's really critical that you take care of this because no one knows everything.
Yeah. And even if you're, with a partner, if your partner travels with you, then the stuff happens.
Right.
There's a question here. Can you hold up, Loretta, can you hold up the little cartoon drawings again, the life support contrasting with a hospice death?
Yeah. I can send this to email,
Yeah. And it's an image we've seen on the various Facebook posts. I actually think that our Facebook page may have it some years ago, we may have posted that.
And again, don't ever pull the plug to the people who love you. Yeah. Okay, is that good?
Yeah. There's another question, and yes, the recording will be available not only to you, registered people, but it will be on our website, which means that it is accessible to the entire
world.
I
don't have Swedish stuff.
Yeah. So, members of any, group, church, organization, friends, family, just share it, definitely.
Right. I don't have The Art of Swedish Death Cleaning because I have it on a PowerPoint, but I didn't do the PowerPoint for this because it was too complicated.
Yeah, and that's okay. Someone actually put the title, I believe, with the
Magnuson.
Yeah. So we have that. Yeah. I also wanted to mention here quickly. You had mentioned, ways of starting, all the ways of getting into a conversation about end of life. And there are also, for people who don't like to read or don't know how to approach a conversation, there are some games, card games, that you can play, that you can do by yourself. And I will quickly mention those. There is a game called Hello. There is a game called Go Wish. And then there is one called the Death Deck. And the Death Deck also came up with another game similar called End of Life Deck. They all have these slightly different approaches, but they are really good. I recommend that, you kind of look for them a little bit, and they are really good at just giving you ideas. I know someone who at every Thanksgiving dinner with her family will say, okay, now we have 10 minutes to talk about what I will need at the end of my life. So she makes sure her children and significant others know about her wishes, and she revises them every year, and she shares them, and no one can have pie until that happens.
There's also the Death Cafe, which the volunteer hospice has regularly, and there's Death Over Dinner, which is a website. It was a graduate school project, and they have a website. They have a TED Talk. There's a YouTube that I'm going to recommend by Frank Ostaseski. He's on his book, The 5 Invitations is on my list. And he has a couple of YouTubes. One is on being vulnerable. That is really powerful. Yeah. And he's founded the Zen Hospice in San Francisco and the Meta Institute End of Life Care Practitioner Program, which I graduated from. So I highly recommend doing anything that Frank is doing. And he himself has had 2 serious heart attacks and 2 serious strokes, and he's my age.
Yeah, Frank is very close to my heart also.
Yeah. Anything else?
Other question, let's see. I'm not seeing other questions. Well, I think we may end here. Let's see, there's another message here. No, okay. I want to be, yeah.
I want to reinforce being kind to yourselves.
uh,
I spent most of my life feeling not good enough. I'm serious, really. I don't want to blame my depressed Italian mother or my Catholic school education, but I just sort of did that. And it took a lot of therapy and a lot of coursework and a lot of a lot of serious effort. And gratitude and service, just and being with dying, being in the nursing home. I retired right when my mother moved into the nursing home, and I was there 5 nights a week and sometimes more. I just found being with all those women and men who had, some of them were living in conditions I couldn't believe they didn't want to die. And that's a terrible judgment, like, oh, that's not a life worth living. But I saw just this, people found reasons to be alive and be glad for what they had and what they were doing. And that just made me realize that I control my happiness. Happiness is an inside job. Like that was something I saw somewhere once. And it's really true. Happiness is an inside job. And sometimes it's hard. I mean, I know, people have sick kids or spouses, loved one, whatever. We all, it's the human experience is not a straight path, a straight road, but I really want you to consider your ooh la la time. Okay? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is that the end of it? Okay, and I
And
appreciate
yeah,
those of you who put dogs on for me, Paco. You're not alone. Have that, they're great practice because they don't shy away.
they don't. And I will
And
just,
the next time you're having a family dinner, don't be afraid to say you had this conversation. Let's talk about it. Talk about yourself too. I started with my sister before she could ever talk about her own advanced directives. I said, I want you to listen to mine. And then they started to come. And then when she got sick, we refined all of that. Yeah. So don't, it's a part of life. It's a sacred part of life. And every choice we make is, you know what, I think one more thing. There are 5 remembrances that the Buddhist 5 remembrances. One of them is, we are of a nature to grow old. We are of a nature to, if we're lucky, we're a nature to be sick. We're of a nature to die. None of our possessions will keep us from death. And all we really have are our actions. So that's what you're going to be remembered for.
wonderful.
Be happy.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, one and
Thank you,
all.
everybody. Thank you, everyone.